they're owing like 3 months worth
Or
of
they have to go back.
money.
So, they have to go back to that weekly.
Yes, because that weekly, at least you get something at the end of the week.
Every week.
Catch up.
You can catch up.
Yes.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
Very, very tough.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Okay, I think please let's take our picture and we're ready to get started. I'm sorry that took a while.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's quite all right. We shifted our location, but nobody seems to know that, so we're restarting. All right, here we go.
Saboy is muted. I think he's trying to say something.
Oh, I said I noticed the white background as opposed to the green background, but I didn't want to say anything yet.
We did shift.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Looks like a bigger place we must celebrate it.
Okay, thank you.
If I mean, that can only mean you're looking for more money. Remember what we just said, you get paid for the hours you work.
Yep.
All right.
Well, here we are. Welcome.
Yeah. Now we're good to go.
Yes, we are.
All right. Welcome to the Thinking Reimagined podcast. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. I'm joined by thought leader, educationist, leadership and behavioral coach and author. She's the founder of Live Abundantly, Allied Empowerment, and the Thinking Reimagined podcast. Dr. Amma is right here with us. Hi, Dr. Amma.
Hello, Nifemi. I'm so glad to be here because this topic is very dear to me, mental health. So I'm so happy to have Dr. Angela with us today, as well as Peter Amandboyo, because Mental Health Day is coming up next week. And what better time than to address a topic that is rarely discussed in many circles. For those on the African continent, it's probably rarely discussed at all. But abroad, at least, there's a greater awareness of mental health and the significance that it plays in our lives. I find that people spend more time thinking about their physical health and not their mental health. And yet the mental health is so important to having better physical health. So I'm glad that we're here to raise awareness and also to recognize the importance of healthy mental health for your life, for the quality of life, for your ability to relate to others, and to be happy. You can't have a sense of happiness and fulfillment if you don't have good mental health. So welcome, Dr. Angela, and everyone else to this podcast.
Thank you
Indeed.
for having me.
Dr. Angela is a board-certified psychiatrist, a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. And the last time I said she had 37 years experience, she'll be more than that now in general medicine. And years practice experience in psychiatry and psychopharmacology. So the theme for this year's Mental Health Day is making mental health and well-being for all a global priority. On this podcast, we'll be looking at the concept of the issue of anxiety. Okay, so I like to begin with a layman definition, a feeling of worry,
Layperson. Layperson. Thank you.
Definition, a feeling of worry or nervousness, about something you're uncertain about. But Dr. Angela, that's an amount of, how do I put this? It is normal to get worried when you're uncertain. Perhaps you help us understand what to look out for when it gets out of hand.
Well, I think I'll have Dr. Amma start that, because I think anxiety, when we talk about anxiety, and thank you for having me, and Mental Health Day is a great opportunity for all of us, even those of us that provide mental health, to do our own mental health checks. Because we all talk about mental health, and the reason why, like Dr. Amma had said, a lot of people don't get care is that stigma and that anxiety, the word you used about what does it mean if I actually say something is wrong with me. But I think, it's an opportunity for all of us to do that mental health check. Where are we? How are we doing? What are our relationships like? How do we feel about the space that we occupy? How do we feel about, how do we think we're relating to our families? How is our work going? Are there areas in your work that we think that we could do different, we could do better? Is this time to change? Those ones that are in the last decade, the last few decades of our lives, they're like, okay, this is a good time to pivot. And I think that's all part of, you have to be healthy, and people don't understand that, you can't make these changes in your life if you're not healthy. And so just like Dr. Amma said, it's an opportunity to kind of do our own mental health checks. For me in the US, it's like the beginning of our mental health season. As you know, the weather changes, as those of us in the Northeast, and this is the beginning of when we get really busy. The holidays are a really tough time for a lot of people who've lost family members, who are alone, and it gets darker in this period. It's an opportunity for all of us to say, this is kind of the beginning of our mental health season. So making sure everybody is focusing on their wellness. But I think, so go ahead, Amma, in terms of anxiety.
No, I was going to add to that, in terms of anxiety and mental health, I mean, things have changed since the COVID period, the pandemic. There's a lot of anxiety that came through during the pandemic because, as you said, there was a change in how we related to ourselves with others. There were those who were not able or who thrive and live off being in connection with somebody. And when you're in your home and you can't get out, and you're dealing with anxiety, that really can be exacerbated when you don't have the opportunity for that human contact, because having human contact is natural for us. So there's a heightened sense of anxiety, no doubt, since the pandemic, with the wars, with the inflation crisis, economic crisis. All of those things really come to affect one's mental state. So it's really important when you're dealing with or talking about mental health to recognize that we're talking about emotional, psychological, social well-being, and all of those factors are very important. But in terms of anxiety, I think somebody mentioned that it's something that happens naturally, but when it becomes paralyzing, where you can't function, where you're nervous and you're always thinking of the doom, or panicked, or your blood pressure goes up, or you're hyperventilating, those kinds of things really cause one to have to take a moment to think and to recognize that there is something here that's beyond the normal sense of anxiety that we all get at some point in time, and making sure that that sense of well-being is there. So for me, Mental Health Day is a time to create greater awareness. And if I could just bring in the neurobiology, I think it's important for people to become aware of how their body reacts to the stresses of lives that cause the change, as well as how they're going to then sort of move beyond. Because for me, very often when you're dealing with that anxiety, or it's the onset of it, if you pay attention, your body will give you some of the warning signs, the sweaty palms, and so you can then begin to sort of adapt to your thinking or how you're approaching it, so that there's a sense of rethinking and resetting your mind so that you can adjust to those changes in a healthy way, without ruining the rest of your life. I mean, there are people who have anxiety and live normal lives, but what we're looking for is being able to manage it better so that it does not disrupt the quality of life.
And I think I would agree with that. And I think when you think about anxiety, just like Femi said, it can be normal, it's normal nervousness, but I think people don't understand that when it gets to a point when it begins to interfere with your daily life. And if you have a young kid who can't take an exam in school, for instance, because he's having so much anxiety that he's failing classes, in college, he's dropped out of college. That is no longer normal. It's an excessive fear that, and an excessive fear of anticipation that has actually impacted your psychosocial functioning. So we talk about in psychiatry, when we say things are now a disorder, it's because they've prevented you from doing things. Like I have a fear of, boats and being in the middle of the sea, so a form of agoraphobia, but I don't have a job as a naval commander. So I think I can kind of survive my normal life without that. And the occasional time I need to go, maybe I could meditate. But for somebody who has a fear of flying and they can't, and that's the job, and they have to divert their income or not do the job or call out 24 days in a week because they have to travel to Abuja 3 times a week for work, then that's no longer normal anxiety. It's interfering with your ability to perform your daily life. It's interfering with your ability to function. And we also talk about separation anxiety. People, all of us have, young children. Some people have young children. Mine are no longer young, but we have the type of anxiety where a kid is, can't be torn away from their parent. You're dropping off. You see those kids when you're dropping off your younger ones at school, that are screaming and yelling, and all the teachers are coming out. People are trying to calm everybody down. So when things are excessive or out of proportion, when you have a woman who is in her 30s and, she sees a spider and she disintegrates and she's yelling and crying and having a whole attack, that's kind of out of proportion. So that's when you now realize that it's excessive. And those are the anxieties that we want to treat so that people can kind of get back into their normal lives.
Mr. Boyo, I saw your hand up earlier.
I just wanted to make a point or comment because going back to the drawing board. No, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
I said I was just trying to make a comment or point, going back to the drawing board. Like this is from experience of what I've heard and seen. A lot of people confuse mental health with dementia or madness. So they don't want to address issues that deal with mental health. And like Dr. Angela and Dr. Amma have broken it down, mental health is much more than dementia. It's anxiety, worry, fear of something, happiness. I mean, it has to do with your mental well-being. But there's this stigma that if you get help or if you seek advice for mental health, it's dementia or it's crazy or it's madness. So I just wanted to bring that point for maybe those listening, that mental health is not madness.
Absolutely. And that's perhaps what Dr. Amma said earlier, the fact that we probably don't take it that serious here in Africa. If you are anxious, you are just anxious. Nobody cares about what's wrong with you, as long as you are not bedridden and stuff like that. But I also like us to just perhaps distinguish what the difference is. You have highlighted what to look out for when it gets to the extreme and it begins to affect your normal activities. But what is anxiety disorder? I also know that there is what they call PTSD. Is there a medical condition, related to all of this that we're talking about?
Well, I think I can start there, because when we say something is a disorder, it implies that it is impacting your functioning, social functioning, like relationship with families, economic functioning, your relationship with your job and your money. So, and also, so psychologically, so it's impacting everything. That's why we call it a disorder. Because otherwise, like Dr. Amma said, anxiety is kind of normal. Some people have excessive anxiety, some people have less, but it prepares you, flight, or stay,
Life, yeah.
So it prepares you for things. It helps you anticipate. Some young people do better when they're anxious. They can get their homework done. They can get into exams. Some people, when they're anxious, they perform more. But when something's a disorder, so there are many. I think the top 3 most common ones are generalized anxiety. And people don't really realize that generalized anxiety is actually it's an illness. It's you worry about everything. Is that person who worries all the time, who is paralyzed by worry. They have tension in their shoulders. Dr. Amma will talk to you about in their back. They can't get anything done because they're worried. This is not the normal level of worry. This is the worry that you're not only you have physical symptoms, you just can't get anything done. So that's one of the big, and if you've had that for 6 months or more, and you worry more times than not in a day and more hours than not, then you have generalized anxiety. So you need to get it treated because it's affecting what you do. You can't get to work on time because you're worried. You can't go to you can't perform at any interviews. You're worried, you're sweaty. You worry about your sister's health. You worry about your family. You can't sleep because you're worried. So that's one, they call that one generalized anxiety because you worry about everything. So worry word is someone who's always tense, and we have those people in our lives, always tense, and they think that's who they are. And then for me, what's very exciting, especially treating our community back here, is when you actually treat the person and all of a sudden they're different and they're, completely upset. They just spent the last 20 years worrying when they could have actually not have to worry, That's one. One of the other common ones is panic, panic disorder. So what is panic disorder? It's somebody who, and we know those are kind of more what we think about when we talk about anxiety. So those are people who have physical symptoms. And Dr. Amma mentioned that a little bit, where you have shortness of breath, you have palpitations, your heart is racing. Sometimes you feel like you want to throw up. You feel like your hands are shaking. And this just happened out of the blue, not necessarily to anything. And it can just suddenly happen. You have about, there's so many, you're sweating, you're twitching. Sometimes you have that feeling where you can't swallow. You feel like you can't swallow. And then you have to drink some water, or your mouth suddenly gets dry, or you suddenly have sweaty palms, or you're suddenly, you need to go to the bathroom. And so if you have any of these symptoms, 4 or more of these symptoms that come suddenly out of the blue and are physical symptoms, whether they're not in response to anything at all, then that's a panic disorder. So those are the common ones. And the third one, you talked about PTSD. PTSD is not really as common as some of the other more general ones, the generalized anxiety, the OCD, the people who are constantly worrying about, their thought process. And so PTSD is also post-traumatic stress disorder. Somebody who's had a traumatic experience as defined by what they think is traumatic. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have been in a war, as a female or male. You don't have to have been raped, or you don't have to have been harassed, but you just have this feeling, something happened to you. And some people remember them and it comes back vividly all the time. And each time it comes back, you have these physical responses and emotional. So when things are a disorder, which are not as common, 30% in the US here, 1 in 5 people experience mental illness. Anxiety is the most common. The very exciting thing about an anxiety disorder, that is also the most treatable. It's so treatable. So it's actually, when patients come to me and say, oh, they're anxious, they have anxiety, and their family doctors refer them, I'm actually really excited, because this is somebody you can be sure that, with the right therapy, with the right talking, with the right cognitive exercises, right meditation, and if needed, a sprinkling of medication, if needed, can really go back to 100% function. It's actually really exciting. Anxiety is one of the more treatable illnesses.
Interesting. I'd like us to explore how people can come to a place where they understand their anxiety, the triggers, and what's affecting them.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Amma. It's an area that she's very good at.
Yeah, how do you recognize your question? Just want to repeat it, if I may, is how people can recognize it?
Yes, understand it, the triggers.
Well, as Dr. Angela mentioned, very often some of these things go back to an experience, a past experience, or something that's happened in your life, that when you think about it, you begin to feel certain sensations. And then other times it's just something that's developed because the environment in which you are has changed, which is why you have to be very mindful of how you look at it. But when you begin to notice that you're reacting in a particular way, which requires that you become aware of yourself. So you have to really spend some time with yourself. And generally people don't. They wake up and they start doing things. It's a routine. Yeah. I've got this routine. I wake up, I get dressed. It takes longer for you to recognize when something is off. And when you do recognize it's off, it's because you've had a moment or you've had an experience that's caused you to take a back seat and look at it. But very often, Stress, for example, we tend to look at stress as normal. There's nothing normal about it. I mean, there's a certain amount of stress you need to function, but the amount of stress we put on ourselves can sometimes disrupt how we feel and how we relate to things. So really, you have to know yourself. You have to know your body. You have to become aware of the things that are normal for you. And when that becomes elevated, you have to watch your mood swings. Very often when your moods change, or your ability to do things with others, or your ability to get up and do the things that you would normally do, then there's been a change somewhere, and it's important. So a level of awareness is really critical. It really is critical to know yourself, to be aware of the changes in your body, and to sort of keep a journal. If you can keep a journal, many people don't keep a journal. Many people don't stay at the end of the evening to sort of think about, how was my day? What occurred during my day? What threw me off? So that is, for me, that's very critical. Is one of the things that I always ask my clients when I'm working with them: what has changed? What is going on physically? What's going on that's changed in your environment? What are you doing that's different? And from there, you can begin to put the pieces together to see what's changing in their environment and in their lives, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I can remember keeping a journal or a diary. I had someone say that you probably have to write some things down so you can track what makes you happy or what makes you sad. Personally, I think when I have money, I'm okay. The only thing I'm just kidding. But usually I found that.
But it helps. It helps. There's no denying it helps.
You're excited when you have money with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what Dr. Angela said earlier about children. So children also get anxious.
Mm-hmm.
I read somewhere that there's anxiety in childhood, but the challenge here will be most of them cannot even express themselves. They can't say I'm anxious. They can't say how they're feeling. So how do we begin to watch out for them and identify and also provide some level of help for children in this regard?
So one of the things that I do, and I hope that we continue to do, I know it's not done here in Nigeria, I'm going to be honest about that, is have children express their feelings and teach them to express their feelings. Very often when children are expressing their feelings, it gets suppressed. But if you give them the language, if you give them the space to express themselves, you're more likely to get them telling you how they're feeling. So how are you? How are you? Is a very basic question, right? And people always say, I'm fine, thank you. Well, okay, all right. Now, what are you doing? What's going on in your life? How is your relationship in school? Do you have friends? Those are the kinds of things that you can begin to ask children, at a very early age. Do you like that food? Why don't you like it? How does it feel? How does it taste? Give them language that children can use to describe how they feel about things, and give them that space where they can actually come to you to express themselves, so that you can see what's going on. If a child is being dropped off at school and they're clinging on to your leg and you can't move, or you have to get all the teachers out to help, there's something going on there. And asking those questions and observing and speaking to the teachers will be very critical, because if they're not doing that at home and they're doing it at the school, then something is going on in the school environment that you need to pay attention to. If you come home and your child who normally spends time with you is running into the room, something is going on. Or if they're sitting very quietly or not eating, engage in conversation. It is very normal. But I find that many parents are sort of not parenting, for lack of a better word. So they're missing opportunities to connect with their children and help them to own their feelings. If you don't own your feelings, it's like a cycle, because after a while you start to think there's something wrong with me. And then you take on ownership of that behavior, when in reality, if somebody speaks to you, you can mitigate it. One of the things that I do with my clients is use metacognition, which is changing how you're thinking. So how are you feeling? Here's an example. Someone said to me the other day, I'm really tired. Are you really tired, or are you overwhelmed? Because there's a difference. So using the right language makes things much easier. And if you're overwhelmed, turn it around into a positive in a way, because having positive language changes how your mind works and changes how you approach things. And very often we're so quick to say, oh, I'm stressed. Are you really stressed, or are you overwhelmed? Are you really stressed, or have you taken on too much? Are you really stressed, or have you set too many things on the agenda, where if you just take off a few of them, then you can actually go ahead and do those things and have success in it. So it's really about language and recognizing that your thoughts will drive the emotions. And then from those emotions, you're going to have feelings. You've got to put a break somewhere in order to be able to have more control. But you also have to be honest with yourself when you're beginning to notice a change in how your body is reacting to things, because your body will give you a cue as to what is going on. But we have to listen. We have to stop long enough to listen. So I always encourage my clients to have time at the end of the day when they're not thinking and doing, they're just present to see how they're feeling, and to have a baseline, a threshold for what is normal for them. So when you feel your heart is elevated, is it because you're taking on too much, or you're thinking too much, or somebody's putting undue pressure, or you saw somebody who has triggered a past trauma, and to recognize that. And that helps you to be able to move forward and see, is this normal anxiety, or is it one where I need further treatment?
Dr. Angela, I see you were nodding all the way. You must have something to say.
No, I was just saying that I'm just like Dr. Amma said, that thinking kind of changes the way you feel. And a lot of times we also want to feel better before we make these changes. But I always tell my clients as well that sometimes the feeling follows the behavior. You want to feel better before you take that walk. But sometimes you just need to take that walk, put it on your diary, take that walk, and then you will find that you'll feel better. So sometimes you have to do the action, so before waiting to feel like doing the action. I'm so stressed that I can't do this, or I can't pick up the phone to call this person, or I can't turn on that music at the end of the day just to listen to it because I'm so tired. Sometimes you just have to do it. So I actually have an alarm on my phone that just makes me, in the end of every 4 hours, I just have to deep breathe. So my alarm goes off. Hopefully it doesn't go off during this meeting. I have to just take those 5 deep breaths in and breathe out, and take those 5 deep breaths, long deep breath, count to 10 in, hold it for 2 seconds, and count to 10 as you breathe out. So we call that tidal breathing, and it's really helpful in stress. So you just breathe in. So over time, when you just start doing it, you can only get 5 or 6, but over time, in terms of how long you can breathe in, but it's really important to slow your breathing as you breathe out. And so if you do that just 5 times, in for 10, out for 10, in for 10, out for 10, sometimes just 3 times. And we forget that you can feel better. And so I actually set my phone to kind of remind me. So we all need those reminders, and also to remember that the action, the feeling can follow the action. Don't wait to feel like you want to do something. Just act first, and then you'll find out that it helps with how you feel.
Mr. Boyle.
Yeah. I also, so sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Dr. Amma, please go ahead.
The other thing I want to say is sometimes the anxiety is self-imposed because we put so much on ourselves. We want to accomplish so much. We live in a world that is hyperactive, naturally hyperactive. It wasn't like this, but it's become so hyperactive, so much action going on, that we need to sort of get a sense of what is the priority really? What is your intention? We want to accomplish 25 things in one day. No, it's not possible. Right. It's just not possible. So I always have my clients identify 3 things that they must do every day, 3 things that I really must do apart from the routine things. And if those 3 things are really heavy duty, perhaps it's just one thing. But when you look at the list and you put all these things on the list, of course you're going to get anxious because you can't get all of it done. But if it's 3 things that are manageable, then go ahead. If it's 2, then go ahead. But I always say, even if there's small little things, don't put more than 5 things on your list, because you've already created that awareness, that tension, and then that tension changes your body chemistry. And then in no time, your cortisol level increases, and you're thrown off completely, and you're spending all day trying to suppress that. by trying to energize yourself again. But if you can just keep a threshold, it makes a difference. So I always say 3 important things that you must do in a day. And if they're heavy duty things, then reduce it to 1 or 2 so that you have a sense of success, because having that sense of success really increases your dopamine level, your serotonin, you're just so happy and you're able to move forward. But if you're dealing with cortisol, and everything is suppressed and you can't function. And then you start thinking, you go into that depressive state and you dysregulate. And once you do that, your anxiety level is heightened.
Don't be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Mr. Boyo, let's talk about women for a bit. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America says women are twice as likely as men to develop an anxiety disorder. According to that association, from the time a girl reaches puberty to the age of 50, she's twice as more likely to develop an anxiety disorder as a man.
As a man?
Is that something you've noticed? Yes, twice as more likely to develop.
I didn't quite.
Yeah.
Well, from dealing with the youth, I tend to disagree, but in a way it might be correct. So I'm a little bit torn on that because, yes, especially in this society, the younger girls seem to have a lot of anxiety because they're dealing with, first of all, the female child. We know in this part of the world it's not taken as serious as the male children. If there's 5 children and 4 of them are male and 1 is female, she might not be allowed to go to school as much as, I'm just giving examples now. After secondary school, they're like, well, she's going to get married and all that. So there's that anxiety of the young girls that want to further their education or want to be taken as equals to their male siblings or contemporaries or whatever you want to call it. And but I feel like in today's society, it's maybe 70-60 because the guys still have a lot of pressure. Being post-COVID and the way the country, the world is now, economic issues and anxiety, I think, is at a higher level than it was before. So I don't know when that study was done, but just for instance, yesterday, I had someone send me a message that they want to commit suicide. And I'm like, why? It's like, I'm tired of living. I'm like, you're barely 20. You still have about 50, 60, 70 years to live and you're tired already. It's like, it's just too much. I'm like, tell me what's going on. It's like, I'm finished school. I don't have a job. I don't have a place to stay. Where I'm staying, my brother says he can't take care of me and his family. So all those things are what is making the young people anxious. And then I have girls also that I mentor, and they have similar complaints, but they also have that extra feeling of, well, my parents want me to get married because they can't take care of me anymore. Or I want to go to university, but they don't believe I should be going to university. I'm sure Dr. Amma and Dr. Angela will know about this, but it's becoming like an everyday issue, especially here in Nigeria, because I don't know about everywhere else in the world, but here it's becoming very, very prevalent. And I think it's almost a 50-50 split, but I'll still agree a little bit that maybe 70-60.
Let me get Dr. Angela out in this.
Can I just add something that I do think that there's added pressure on girls globally. We tend to have greater expectations, restrictions,
Definitely.
and what we call the good girl syndrome that many women suffer from. And that in itself can add to anxiety for young women and for of the society. and families and the culture places on girls is much higher than what they place on boys. You know, from a very early age, girls, whether you're in the city or in a rural area, there's certain expectations of how you're going to live, what you're going to do, the expectations for your behavior, the expectations of how you relate to others, the expectations of what you're going to do with your life. And I think all of those can add to the anxiety levels that girls feel more than men. But there are also the traumas that girls experience from a very early age because of the way the society, which is a patriarchal society, treats and views girls and women. So I do think I do believe that research is accurate, that women have higher levels of, or could have higher levels of anxiety than men. And even our bodies change so drastically. I mean, you talk about girls going through puberty and going through their menstrual cycles. You know, there was a recent study done in India where they had some men, I don't know, Angela, if you've seen it, where they gave men the opportunity to have the experience of what period cramps were. They couldn't tolerate it, you know, but these are things that men, yes, Nifemi's eyes got wider. They could not tolerate it, but all of these things change the body chemistry, change the way you're reacting to things. And so I do believe that there's more anxiety within women than men based on all of these factors coming together. Yeah.
I would agree, especially, you know, I think the expectations, and I know we talked about, you know, girls are expected to kind of marry and, you know, take care of the home. But as we know, as the world has changed, girls are also equal and sometimes the sole income providers. But we also know the studies are very clear that women and girls have the major burden of raising the families and the children. So if you're the sole income provider, and you have a husband who's probably not working, and then, or a partner who's not working, and then in addition to that, you carry the major burden of family. That in its own is a template for more anxiety. You know, so I think those roles and you know those, like you said, the cultural roles, and it's everywhere. You know, in the US as well. You know, they're still in a model where women are thought that they work less and they earn less, and they know that they earn less, but at the same time, they're providing the major support for families, and in terms of the burden of taking care of the family, taking care of the home, taking care of if their children, and at the same time, you know, also working outside the home. You know, so
absolutely. Yeah, it's very typical. Yeah, it's very typical for a working woman, you know, to go to work all day long, come home, and then if she has a partner, he's sitting down there watching television and relaxing, and she's in the kitchen, and then after the meal is complete. No, it's still going on.
That doesn't really happen.
All of us creating that awareness.
That's not true.
Yeah, but
there has to be awareness.
Yeah, I think creating that awareness that everybody, even among families, and you know, among cultural families, among that, you know, women do need help. Even just that help it helps the guys too, or it helps whoever their partner is. If the person, are you doing okay? How can I help you? Just a simple question like, how can I help? You know, that alone can decrease one's level of anxiety and prevent somebody becoming from normal anxiety and stress into an anxiety disorder.
That's right.
It's a lot. It really is a lot. And you know, so sometimes just asking, you know, not waiting for it to, like we had this recent case in the US that it's been on the news, and those of you in the news media would know about it. A young woman that killed 3 of her children in New York, just drowned them, just took them one by one and drowned them. You know, and we hear these stories all the time of a woman who killed her children or did this or committed suicide. And why do we have to wait till then? You know, we all have that in our family. When we know that these stresses can make somebody get to a breaking point, we also know people are not going to talk about treatment. You know, so just everyday people, like Dr. Amma said earlier, how are you doing? You know, I'm fine, thank you. No, but how can I help you today? All of us just going back to our partners today to say, you know, even if that's all we got from this session, is how can I help? How can how can I help today? What are some of the things that you need me to do?
And just to add real quick about this puberty, a lot of girls go through anxiety because when they hit puberty and they get like their first period, they're teased. And I know of an instance where in the school, the girl was teased and because she had a blood stain on her dress. So a lot of young girls have that anxiety. And also in some communities, girls are not allowed to go to school or come out during their period. And I know we went to film in, I don't want to call it town, in Nigeria. And in this village, women, when they have their period, they're not allowed to come to the stream to get water. They have to be in a separate part of the village. So that too is a lot of anxiety on young girls, especially because the period that's supposed to be a natural, beautiful experience becomes
so
something
just
they're
shaming
anxious
people.
about.
A lot of shaming.
Sorry?
I said that's a lot of shaming and blaming.
Yes.
What's just a biological process
It's terrible. It's
you have
terrible.
control over. So instead they
Yes.
use it to create shame. So it can be very
Yes.
challenging, very, very challenging.
And I think parents to prepare their daughters for that first, so it's not a shock or something. They should speak with your child, not to your child. Speak with them, communicate, engage.
Indeed.
Mm.
I think it's been a fantastic conversation. We have to go now. And I like to also just remind the listener what Dr. Angela said. You should walk up to someone today and say, what can I do for you? So many of us are in relationships where we just dump all the responsibility on our partners. You know, we do it so unconsciously. I initially would not agree with Dr. Ahmad that there are still men who will sit down and watch TV while the woman does everything. In an age of global inflation and harsh economic realities, I mean, both people now have to, both parties now have to do their bit, you know, but I think that's very noteworthy to offer help and also help someone carry their burden. We have to go
I do
now.
want to say something before we go, Nifemi,
Yeah.
and Dr. Angela actually alluded to this earlier. People need to breathe. Very often we actually think we're breathing, but we're not breathing. We're not. We take that breath for granted. And if you could just really breathe and recognize that you're taking in air and you're expelling air, it will really help tremendously. We're not really, yeah, there you go, Peter. Breathe, breathe. You should actually take in air when you fill in your stomach, and then you can expel it and you can flatten your stomach. So very often people do it in the reverse. When you're breathing in and you're taking in air, your stomach should get extended. When you're exhaling, your stomach should get flat. We tend to do the reverse and we think we're breathing. We're not breathing. We're taking breath for granted. And if you can control your breath and use it to your advantage, you will find that many of the normal anxieties that you have, you can actually control it. You really can not maybe control it, but manage it better. And manage it better, not control it, but manage it better. And the exercise that she gave, 10 breaths. I mean, some people think it's a lot of work, but start with 4 and work your way. In that process, you're actually meditating. You're taking a moment for yourself. And in that moment, you have a chance to just take care of yourself. Mental health is about self-care. It's about taking care of yourself. No one can do that for you. The same way you will go out and see a doctor because something is wrong with you, you've got a deep cut or whatever it is the same way or same attention that you should give to your mental health.
All right. So an estimated 31% of all adults will experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their life. And anxiety is also fast becoming the most common mental disorder, not only in the US, but in some other parts of the country. So I'm hoping that you'll listen to this podcast again and you will find something there to help you, you know, while you encounter your own episode of anxiety. Dr. Angela, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to see you.
Yeah.
Dr. Boyle, I am Dr. Nifemi. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.